Welcome to this first lesson. And in this lesson, we introduce data structures and algorithms, fundamentals of data structures and algorithms. A very important topic in your journey as a program. Data structures and algorithms. You see, it deals um, with data processing, data storage, and also programming. Okay, because when you talk about a data structure, you can see on the first part there, we have been asked to define what a data structure is. A data structure, I'm going to give you an example of let's say a container storage, for a truck. Okay, just a practical example. So if you have a truck is able to accept different forms of loads. Okay, you can load different things into a container. You can load steel pipes. You can load sacks of maize or anything, right? So the container is an example of a data structure because a container is very complex. A container is able to accept so many different forms of loads. So because it's able to accept so many different forms of loads, it is very complex in nature. It is accepting complex forms of things that are being stored there and eventually being transported. So a data structure, we say that it is a complex storage of data accepting very large volumes uh, of data. Okay, let's handle that. So we're saying that a data structure, that is for the first part, a data structure. What we're saying is that, okay, so that is what we're saying there. So we're saying that a data structure is basically a, a complex data storage unit. Okay, so it is a complex data storage unit. It is very complex in that it is able to store um, very different forms of data. Okay, very different forms of data, very large forms of data, very large forms of data. So that is what makes it very complex. Okay, and then these are in very large volumes as well. Okay, these are in very large volumes. These are also in very large volumes. So this is what we are saying about what a data structure is. So a data structure is essentially that. Okay, a data structure is essentially that. Then you're coming from a background where you've done C++ programming, because even for data structures, you will still be doing programming, and the programming that is involved in this, you'll be doing concepts like arrays, loops, if statements, and structs. Arrays are the first step in data structures. Okay, so an array is part of the C++ programming language. So we need to write arrays in C++ to work with data structures. Hence, what is an array? What is an array? To define an array is a variable, firstly. Okay, an array is a variable. But what makes an array so different from a variable is that an array uh, can accept multiple values. Okay, so let us say this is a variable. Okay, let's say you've got this variable, right? This variable can only store one piece of data. All right, only one piece of data. Whereas an array is different in that an array can accept multiple data pieces. Okay, an array can only accept one piece of data, but an array can accept many different pieces of data. So an array is, it stores multiple values. Okay, it is a variable, but the difference between a normal variable that you know and an array is that an array stores multiple values. An array stores multiple values. So that is what an array basically is. So an array basically is able to store multiple values. It's a variable which is able to store multiple values. Okay, so that is what an array is. Okay, that is what an array is. So to define an array, let me just write the definition of an array. Now I have to note that this is C++. Okay, this is C++, and just like normal variables, an array is very specific in the type of data it stores. So, like when you declare a variable to store integers, it can only store integers. If you declare an array to store integers, it can only store integers. Okay. Similar, when you declare an array, if you say this array is meant to store integers, when you declare this array to store integers, it means it can only store integers, not any other data type, only integers, only integers. So this is why we're saying that an array can store multiple values, but all those values must be of the same type. All those values must be of the same type. Now, to give you an example of how arrays are declared in C++, the way, let's say we want to come up with a variable called numbers, and this variable is supposed to store integers. You will simply say int, then numbers as the variable name. Then you will put your semicolon, right? This is what you usually say in C++. But if you're going to turn this into an array, because these variable numbers can only store one value. If you assign it 2, then it's only 2 it can store. If you assign it 3 or 4, then it can only store 4, right, as a value. But if you wanted to store multiple values, you have to turn it into an array. And how it is turned into an array is by simply introducing these square brackets known as the subscripts. So these are known as subscripts. So inside these subscripts, this is where you basically determine how many values this array is supposed to store, because you should be able to specify that this array that I've declared is going to be able to store 6 values or 5 values or 8 values. Okay, so if we say this one is supposed to store 10 values, it means this is an array which is going to store 10 values. So we've declared this array. So int being the data type, numbers being the name of the array, and then this 10 in the square brackets is the array size. And the array size basically defines how many um, um, how many values can be assigned to the array, which now takes us to question number 3, where we're asked to define the array size. So that 10 there is the array size. So the array size basically just determines how many values an array can accept. So the array size basically determines how many values an array can accept. So the number of values an array can accept is what we are calling the array size. That question 4 says that we need to write a C++ program to create an array to store 6 integers. 6 integers. So in order to write a C++ program, remember you have to write a C++ structure where you say hash include iostream. Then you put your using namespace standard. Then you begin your main program. And you begin your main program. So it is in the main program where we're going to declare the array. So you've been told to declare an array which is going to store 6 integers. So let us just name this array numbers. So we write int, then the name of the array. We've decided that it's going to be numbers. Then how many integers is it supposed to store? Maybe 6 integers. Okay. Then let us actually assign it some integers. Let us assign it some integers. Let us assign it some integers. So let us assign it some integers. So I'll put some integers, 10, 12. So you have to ensure that they're 6. There should not be more than 6 or less than 6. There should be exactly 6. Okay. So now that we've declared that, now that we've declared that, this is pretty much sums up question 4, because question 4 simply asks you to write a program to create an array which is going to store 6 integers. 6 integers. Now question number 5 says, in the array you created in question 4 above, print the second integer. So you've got 6 integers, so you have to print the second integer. So to print, obviously, in C++, you always utilize cout, right? So now what you're trying to see out here, is the values that have been stored in this array, So there's what we call the index number, okay? The index number. There's what we call the index number. So the index number, what it is basically, it simply determines the position of a value in the array. So the position of a value in an array. So is it first in position? Is it second in position? So that is the index number. So even because the question has told us to print the second number, you have to deal with the index number. So how do you access that? So by saying cout, then you write the array name, which is numbers. Then you're going to put the index number here because that's the position number of the array. So you're looking for the second integer. Now, the way you count, you start from position 0. So you say 0, 1, 2, 3 until you finish. So when you look at 10, 10 is position 0. 12 is position 1 because you're starting from 1. Then position 2, 3, 4, 5. 50 is at position 5 because you start counting from 0. Hence, the number that we're looking for, the second one here, 12, has 1, 0, 1. So it is at index position 1. So what you pass there in your cout is 1 inside the square brackets in order to print the second number in the array. This wraps up the first lesson. You can do the exercise that follows, and then you can message me if you've got any questions in terms of where you're not clear. Thank you.